happened? What does ChatGPT have here? Back double bicep goes to Andrew Jack left, the less hamstring glute sharpness on the right. It's not even going to be a fucking work for Andrew to beat Nick. Does Fuad even know what he's doing anymore?
Today's video is going to serve a couple of purposes. Firstly, it's a comparison between the best Andrew Jack from this year and the best Nick Walker from this year. And this slots perfectly into my new best bodybuilders of the 2020 series. But the other main purpose of this video is responding to whatever this is.
Andrew wins the front double bicep. He wins the front lat spread. He wins the side chest. He wins the back double bicep. He wins the back lat spread, rear lat spread, abs and thigh, and the fucking most muscular.
Okay. Thanks.
Now, I want to address something right at the beginning of this video here. I do not hate Muscle Discord. We actually have talked behind the scenes a little bit, and I would consider him an acquaintance. Now, I certainly disagree with a lot of what he says, and perhaps even what he does. I would even call some of his takes dumb, but to be fair, I call my most trusted friends' takes stupid as well.
He's pulling his cock out!
But overall, I think a lot of people in the industry maybe hate Muscle Discord a little too much. At the end of the day, you can't hate the player, you gotta hate the game. He makes the type of content he does because you all line up to watch, myself included. I can't hate on him for that. However, today we are going to have some good old-fashioned disagreement. He recently compared Nick Walker to Andrew Jack as kind of an Arnold Classic preview for next year because they'll both probably do it. However, I guess he really didn't do this comparison, it was ChatGPT. But we all know that that's his thing, he endorses it, so it's either an extension of his opinion or just his opinion. However, I just think a lot of these claims range from very dubious to just straight up retarded.
You fucking prick.
So because this comparison was on my to-do list anyway, let's kill two birds with one stone and respond to Matt's matchup of Andrew Jack versus Nick Walker. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Firstly, I want to note for the versions being used today, we are using the best versions of them from this year, which are the Romania and the Pittsburgh pros for Andrew and Nick respectively. Matt would disagree with me and say that Andrew is better at the Olympia. To each their own. It's more condition versus more fullness. I think the fullness works more for Andrew, but it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't change much in the grand scheme of things. At least with me using this Romania pro version, you get to see the comparison from two slightly different perspectives. Now obviously, I don't think it gets more different when it comes to Andrew versus Nick. It's mass with class versus a mass monster. But what side of the debate did Chat and Matt fall on?
It's giving the front double bicep to Andrew Jack. Reason why left gets it, why Andrew gets it, shape, flow, and taper favor the left.
So overall, I think this is the popular choice. You just gotta go with Andrew on the front double. However, I must say that I don't think it's a blowout, and that's mainly because both sides of the debate are diametrically opposed. Nick does win the bodybuilding things. He's more muscular, more conditioned, and dry, and he has the better arms, so again, not a blowout. A fan of the mass monster era could come in and point out the things I just did and reward Nick the pose. If you come from the era of Dorian or Jay or Ronnie, it's kind of hard to say that's wrong. But I do agree with Chat and Matt in this instance. Andrew still has very good bodybuilding things in this pose. He has great legs, arms, and the thicker, wider lats, but above all else, he has the superior structure and aesthetics that can't be understated. And now for the front lat spread, I decided to just bypass this one. There's no point.
What an asshole this guy is.
I mean, Nick is still pretty weak in this pose, and Andrew is terrific.
So good.
I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to play devil's advocate. I mean, I wouldn't make it 4 points personally, but for the sake of this video, I will.
Side leg is almost as big as Nick's. Good ham, tie-in, glute. Conditioning is better, in my opinion, than Nick's. So, yeah. Andrew Jack beats Nick Walker in the side chest. Fuad.
Already just on our third pose in, and ChatGPT is already being insanely stupid. The thing is, I don't even disagree with the overall call, but the way Chat arrived to its verdict for the side chest is unfathomably stupid, and it's discrediting. What's even worse is the interpreter for the AI data in this video completely backs these claims up.
What a fucking piece of shit this guy is.
I mean, the side leg condition isn't even close. I have no idea how it even arrived to that claim, and I can't believe Matt looked at the same photos and actually agreed. Even with his Olympia condition, Andrew is still well behind Nick's level of graininess and dryness. Nick takes a solid win downstairs, and it's not just because of condition, but it's mainly because of condition. Now in the upper half, between these versions, I do actually have Andrew winning. The midsection is tighter and not an eyesore. His arm and delt have good roundness, so he holds it close in Nick's signature area, and I actually prefer Andrew's chest here. Nick's Pittsburgh Pro version was ultra conditioned, but that clearly affected his chest. All in all, I don't think this is the dominant side pose everyone makes it out to be. It's very good, but I prefer Andrew. He does still measure up in the lower body, although he does lose, don't get it twisted. And then he has the better upper half altogether. And he's bigger and wider than Nick overall. Nick is still a tank, a complete and conditioned one at that, so it's another close pose, but I'm giving a narrow win to Andrew. Chat did also recognize that this is a very close pose, as it said edge to the left, and I would agree with that also. This is the closest pose so far, but Andrew actually wins.
Back double bicep goes to Andrew Jack left. It likes the hamstring detail better on Andrew. The glutes crisper lower back than Nick. The reason why it's giving the back double is because the conditioning detail from the back favors the left. But to me, Nick, you can see a little filmy, a little water. Even though Nick is very conditioned, Andrew's just more crisp.
I gotta be honest, I wasn't even going to make this video until I got to the back poses and the absolute dumpster fire of ChatGPT's so-called analysis. Really though, I am just floored. I don't have anything to say. I was fine with reusing the same bit from the intro because really all those clips speak for themselves. If you hear those things that Chat cooked up and look at the pics and then agree with what Chat said, there's something seriously wrong.
Fucking idiot.
Again, I don't have anything to say. I shouldn't have to say anything. Andrew is crisper than Nick. Nick carries a film of water from the back. Like, are we all looking at the same photos? I even swapped out Andrew's Romania Pro version for the Olympia version just for this pose in an effort to try and decipher the pure retardation that plagues this section of the analysis. I'm sorry, well, not really, but takes like this are what makes ChatGPT lose all credibility. It can be right plenty of times, even more than it is wrong. However, clearly, to get something as wrong as this, as well as some other weird things I've noticed already, no one should take it seriously. And to be honest, I would say the same thing if ChatGPT was a real person. If someone looked at you right in the eye and said that Andrew has a better rear double than Nick, they should be laughed out of the room. This is unironically one of, if not the worst take I've ever heard in my time in bodybuilding.
Hamstring show separation, big back, but looks denser and detailed, the less hamstring glute sharpness on the right. Reason that Andrew's winning with plus detail is why they're giving it, or Chad is giving it to Andrew jacked.
And somehow, Chat's analysis just gets even worse. Imagine this, not only does Chat say that Andrew's hamstrings are more conditioned and so on, but then you read that and wholeheartedly agree with it.
You're a fucking clown.
Furthermore, Nick is in fact the one with the denser back, at least Chat got that right, but I'd say Nick's back is more detailed too, at least on par with Andrew's at the bare minimum. Sure, Andrew is wider and always will be because of the structure, but he's not that much wider, all things considered. Nick is actually really wide on stage and in this comparison. And also, he just hits the pose better. That's another thing. How are you going to give Andrew not one, but both back poses to Andrew when he can't even hit them correctly? A lot of the times the hamstrings aren't flexed or don't stay flexed, the shoulders are rolled forward, and he's not opening up. Literally everything on these two back poses is better on Nick, from thickness to detail to the lower body to the conditioning down to the actual posing itself is better. That's not to say Andrew doesn't have good qualities, he does, and he is improving these poses, but he's not on Nick Walker's level yet. That is completely idiotic. Now, Matt didn't have picks for these side tries, so he didn't include it in his comparison. I was able to find some decent ones, but yeah, that's not the best for trying to judge a contest, especially because on the surface, this does look like a close pose. Andrew actually looks competent in this pose for once, and he's very streamlined, of course. I just think there's more to like on Nick. He has the better side leg, the better condition, and the better tricep for sure. He's actually pretty streamlined in this shot too, while carrying a lot of muscle on his frame. You guys know me, I'm a big fan of Nick Walker's side tries, so I'd actually give him the small win. But don't just take my word for it, let's see what Matt has to say.
So, don't have a side tricep pose from either of these shows to show, so I'm just going to give the side tricep to Nick Walker.
Glad we're on the same page. Moving on to the abs and thighs, let's see what Matt had to say once more.
Fuad thinks that Nick can beat Andrew jacked if he comes in looking like the Pittsburgh Pro look. But anyways, abs and thighs, obviously left, midsection tight, visible blocks, quad separation, outer sweep. Right quads are massive with lines, but waist appears thicker and less controlled.
Side note, I don't know what the beef for the lore here is, but there seems to be some weird obsession with Fuad Abiad. Here's all the times he name dropped him just in this video.
Now, Fuad said that he thinks Nick Walker can beat both Andrew and Martin Fitzwater. I don't know what type of crack cocaine Fuad Abiad is smoking. Andrew Jack beats Nick Walker in the side chest. Fuad, fucking idiot. Fuad thinks that Nick can beat Andrew Jack if he comes in looking like the Pittsburgh Pro look. Does Fuad even know what he's doing anymore? My God, man, that guy's on his last string, I think.
For shits and giggles, I actually did the math on this. He mentions Fuon on average every 3 minutes and 16 seconds, in a roughly 13-minute video when you take out the ads and intro. But anyway, if Fuad did in fact say that Nick can be Andrew jacked in the abs and thighs, he does deserve a few insults. Now, at one time, I actually think this was true. It was a real possibility, but not anymore. But at one time, say at the 2023 Arnold Classic, I think that version of Nick could really push Andrew to pretty much a tie. And Nick right now, even with his best recent version from Pittsburgh, it's just not enough. Although, I still will call it close because he checks those boxes. His abs are very deeply separated, blocky in a good way, and the quads are very cut and developed. Andrew is just overall more appealing. His abs are better looking, more bubbly, and that waist and taper are certainly better, and the quads are terrific as well. However, Andrew won't be getting anything other than a small win here. I don't think that's fair. Nick is doing everything we ask for. He brings terrific abs and great quads. We can't really ask for anything more. But Andrew just happens to be that 1 in a billion athlete that has an 11 out of 10 pose. Nick's pose may actually be pushing a 10 out of 10 shot, but Andrew is just so special. He takes a win, but only a small one. In our last pose, the most muscular, I want to say at the very top before we get into my or chat's analysis that this is legit a close pose. So props to Andrew for being able to stand next to the mutant and look great. Anyway.
So delts, traps, chest pop while keeping the waist tight, legs maintain detail. Right, which is Nick, huge overall, but midsection reads thicker and detail isn't as crisp. Overall reason is because the pop in the clear lines to the left.
Overall, I really can't disagree much with what chat has to say, except in the way it ultimately decides the pose. It says that Andrew has a lot of 3D pop, that's certainly true. He also wins the chest, and he's the bigger, wider guy, which helps of course. Nick is harder though, which helps him look just as impressive next to Andrew, and Nick takes some wins too. He's actually showing off his abs, something Andrew should do, but because he's not, I actually have Nick winning the midsection in this shot. I also have him barely taking the arms and delts. And I even have Nick winning the legs. The waist is pretty much out of the picture here, and when the legs don't have to compete with Nick's waist for what gets your attention first, you can really see how good his legs are. He has the better inner thighs, he's overall drier and more conditioned, and his sweep and development don't look bad where they're not in competition with his waist. So really it's 50-50. I think Andrew has pushed this to the point where it comes down to personal preference. Nick is smaller overall, but still carries a freaky level of size, and he's hard as nails, which makes him even more impressive, but Andrew has the superior stature and is very 3D. So with it being so close, I left it to my personal chat EBT, aka my Discord.
No Black Friday?
Is that when all the black people go shopping?
Correct.
By the way, make sure to become a channel member to get access to that Discord. But anyway, we ultimately decided to give Nick Walker the small win. I don't have much to say other than that. I think I could justify this any way I want it to go. I'm fine with this though, so we'll just leave it at that. And now it's time to drop Matt off because we are going on to round 2 of this comparison. This is a response video, but it's still a comparison, and in my comparison videos, I have the mandatories round and a round for the 4 overall physique categories, which are muscularity, condition, shape, and flaws. Matt doesn't do this in his comparisons, come to think of it, no one does, but I like to consider the overall metrics of the physique rather than just the poses alone. Anyway, starting with muscularity, I have Nick taking a small win. Oh, and by the way, I didn't explain this earlier, but I use a margin of victory point system in these comparisons. Small wins equal 2 points, medium wins are equal to 3, and then dominant wins are worth 4 points. You'll see what I had for each pose on the scorecard in just a moment, but for the muscularity category, Nick is getting 2 points. Andrew is bigger overall with his structure, and he's got a good amount of size on it, but overall, Nick is still packing more muscle per square inch, and he's more complete. That backside on Andrew was really out of its depth next to Nick too, and I really can't get over that. So because Nick is winning more of the underlying aspects in regard to muscularity, he gets the points. Next in the condition category, Nick gets an even bigger win. Now, I did use the Romania Pro version, which although I do think it's superior to Andrew's Olympia version, the condition aspect was actually a touch worse. But I really don't think it makes too much of a difference, Romania or Olympia. I'm giving the points to Nick in this comparison, and he's getting 3 of them. Just because Andrew got a few glute striations at the Olympia doesn't mean he's ready to take on one of the most conditioned versions of Nick Walker ever. Clearly, there's just a big disparity here. From the front, it's close. You may even want to give that area to Andrew. That's why I won't do 4 points, but then from the side and especially the back, Andrew gets blown out. Then in the shape category, this is another place where I'm just not going to argue at all. I personally wouldn't give Nick a 4-point loss here. I think his shape is acceptable for open bodybuilding, but again, not going to play devil's advocate, not even going to argue, so Andrew's going to get 4 points. But that finally brings us to the flaws category, and each guy has one thing I want to punish, and it stems from the same core misstep: posing. Nick in that last round of the Pittsburgh Pro was letting his stomach go, and to this day, Andrew hasn't figured out all of the mandatories. Honestly, I think both of these things are equally as detrimental, but I don't want to punish Nick for something semi-shape related when I already over-punished him once. So I think on multiple accounts, a tie is in order for our last category. Alright, now it's time to reveal the final scores and the winner of the matchup on my end, and then we'll get into what Matt and chat cooked up. I actually had an extremely close matchup. Winning this comparison with 51.5 points was Nick Walker, with Andrew Jack just barely missing out with a score of 48.5 points. Honestly, that is 50-50. That's my final verdict. This really is a test of your own judging philosophy. Again, Nick is a mass monster and he definitely wins in the bodybuilding department, but Andrew is mass with class, and now he finally has enough mass to actually be a true alternative to Nick, even in my eyes. I think we can agree that it's close. You are either going to fall into Camp Nick or Camp Andrew, but the divide between them couldn't be wider. So while it's not close if you're just viewing it from one of those camps, objectively people fall into either one of two groups, so again, 50-50. With that said, what did Matt's ChatGPT analysis end on for its final verdict?
Andrew wins the front double bicep. He wins the front lat spread. He wins the side chest. He wins the back double bicep. He wins the back lat spread, rear lat spread, abs and thigh, and the fucking most muscular. And it's not even going to be close. Does Fuad even know what he's doing anymore?
Shut up, bitch!
I'm sorry, but giving every single pose to Andrew is stupid. Like, that is hilariously wrong. But we've already been through the poses, so we don't need to talk about that. But it's clear if Nick brings a good version like the Pittsburgh Pro and Andrew keeps bringing good versions like that the Olympia or Romania, this is going to be far from a blowout on either end. And then, of course, this was an Arnold Classic preview of sorts, and we know Martin Fitzwater is doing it as well, and that just makes it even closer. It's like a sliding scale for bodybuilding judging criteria. As you go up the scale, you lose aesthetic appeal, but gain a better foothold on the bodybuilding things. Personally, that's why I think Martin wins out of the three if they're all on. It's the best of both worlds, but he's not in this video, so I digress. Now, if Nick shows up off, Andrew will beat him. Of course he would. That just happened at the Olympia. But we're not talking about that. Great version to great version, it's not a blowout. In fact, I actually have Nick winning just slightly, but again, this reflects on my own criteria. I prefer mass, completeness, and condition to be tiebreakers rather than shape. But if you prefer more shapely physiques and weight that a lot in your judging, then Andrew wins, and he's good enough in the bodybuilding side of things now that I don't think it's too wrong to give him the win. And even if we were trying to predict what's going to happen based on past placings and so on, a lot of people would count Nick out. Matt is doing exactly that, but I wouldn't do that at all. Yes, Nick had a bad showing at his last contest, his worst ever in his career. But who's to say he can't get better next time? I mean, have you seen his recent updates? He's looked the best he has in years. Even Muscle Discord can't hate.
The waist looks a little smaller. I'll admit it looks a little better here. Especially in that side tri. So, you know, he looks good in these poses, right?
Yes, it does.
Right, this is a really gnarly shot for Nick. And look at the side quad. Like that's the Dorian Yates kind of gnarly looking here. So I'll give him props. It looks good here.
And you know who else had bad showings but came back from them? Martin and Andrew. Andrew was pretty downsized at the Arnold and then way off at the FIBO show, but then he brought his best two versions back to back at this year's end. And Martin, he was just awful at the Pittsburgh Pro. Some people were saying Bonac could have beat him. But then he also brings his best ever versions at the end of the year. All in all, I think it's dumb to count Nick out, but it's also dumb to compare these two versions of these two bodybuilders and say it's a blowout either way. But that's what happens when ChatGPT rots your brain.
Now, Bob referred to me as the retarded kid at school.
The last thing I want to touch on in this video is the use of AI in bodybuilding. First off, I do get the appeal of it. The current way of judging sucks. The IFBB kind of sucks, period. It would be nice to have some kind of robot be able to judge the shows in an unbiased way, but the problem is AI cannot critically think nor reason like a human can. And it's just one thing to look at what AI spits out and try to interpret that data, but Muscle Discord just went along with everything it said like it can't be wrong. But it clearly can be. I mean, it gave Andrew Jack every single pose and said shit that was completely made up. I really don't mind if you have Andrew winning this comparison, but anyone that does have him winning won't be arguing with a lot of chat's points in mind because a lot of them were just completely nonsensical. Also, why are we using ChatGPT as our AI of choice? Quite frankly, bodybuilding is way too niche and way too intricate for any mainstream AI to decipher with any degree of accuracy. I don't even hate the idea of AI being used, at least for YouTube videos and such, but for judging shows with actual results and money behind it, I just don't think that's possible right now. But with that in mind, why not just train your own AI model? Wouldn't that be the smart thing to do? Again, it probably still wouldn't work because any AI is going to lack the skill of a human brain, but you can at least try to get it to weight, shape, size, or condition depending on the criteria of a pose. And you can train it by just constantly feeding it comparisons and explaining them to it, but again, it's going to be somewhat biased. If I train the model and if Lee Haney trains the model, they're going to be completely different at the end of the day. Matt seems to forget that even these AI models have some level level of bias, from just you asking questions in a certain way to just the programmers who designed it and the choices that had to be made to get it to work how it does. You cannot escape bias, but still, creating your own AI model would definitely be better. It would at least be a more honest attempt, but still a fool's errand. I think the best way to judge bodybuilding is to create a formula like I did. Poses are worth a certain amount and are judged on different criteria, and other things are taken into consideration as well. Then you just plug the numbers in and that's your answer. No, it is not completely unbiased, and I never will say it is. But you'll never get that from AI either, and AI certainly isn't the answer. And my way of doing things is a lot more transparent, measured, and coherent than the IFBB scribbling a couple of bull numbers on a piece of paper and passing it in. I really do appreciate what Matt is trying to do, and I'll back him up on his core premise every day of the week. To my eyes, the IFBB is rigging shows, not a formal accusation, but they are using their shady, fuck-ass judging system to hide behind a lot of these very controversial calls. And even if they aren't rigging shows or doing all of this shady shit, I think the judging system still needs to be reformed and just be a lot more transparent. But that is a whole other topic deserving of its own multi-hour analysis. But if there is one thing that Matt and I agree on, it's that the IFBB needs to change its judging. That much is certain. But if you want my answer as to if the IFBB should incorporate AI into their judging, well, go ask ChatGPT itself if it can judge bodybuilding shows, and I think you'll have my answer.
Okay, thanks.